Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers.
Right now on Morning News Now, eyes on Eastern Europe. A message from the Biden administration to Americans in Ukraine. We've got your back. The White House now firming up plans to evacuate citizens through Poland if Russia invades. This as joint military drills involving tens of thousands of Russian troops begin. And Britain bets big on diplomatic talks. We've got team coverage from across the region this morning. One step closer, the search for the next Supreme Court justice heating up this morning. White House officials now reaching out to potential picks as President Biden is set to meet with Senate Democrats today to firm up that nomination process. How that will play out and the latest timeline on a possible decision. For the kids, the CDC's plan for Pfizer's COVID vaccine in young children coming into focus. The agency now telling health officials they should expect to receive shipments of the lower dose shot for children under 5 by the end of the month. But there is a caveat. It has not been approved by the FDA yet, but parents should know this morning. We're going to start this hour with renewed efforts to pull Russia and Ukraine back from the edge of war. 2 high-level meetings are taking place today, both spearheaded by Europe.
Yeah, in Moscow, Britain's foreign secretary met with her Russian counterpart as Prime Minister Boris Johnson holds talks with NATO and policy leaders. The latest round of diplomacy comes as Russia begins 10 days of joint military drills with Belarus, with some 30,000 Russian troops expected to take part. And this morning, we could be seeing a new escalation in the crisis, with Ukraine's foreign ministry accusing Russia of blocking the Black Sea with warships. Speaking alongside Johnson a little earlier, NATO's Secretary General said the situation is reaching a boiling point.
This is a dangerous moment for European security. The number of Russian forces is going up. The warning time for a possible attack is going down. NATO is not a threat to Russia, but we must be prepared for the worst, while remaining strongly committed to finding a political solution.
We've got NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley in eastern Ukraine and NBC News correspondent Aaron McLaughlin is in the capital of Kyiv. Thank you both for joining us. Aaron, I'll begin with you and with what seems to be this new escalation, these accusations from Ukraine that Russia is blocking the Black Sea. Are we already starting to see some consequences, some intensifying from these drills?
Hey, Savannah. Well, the Ukrainian Defense Ministry saying today that between February 13th and February 19th, that large sections of the Black Sea and Azov Sea will be unsafe to sail due to Russian military exercises. Russian media reporting that 140 warships and supporting vessels are in the region for military exercises. And this is outraging the Ukrainian foreign minister because it has economic consequences. They're warning of a potential blockade. The spokesperson for the foreign ministry tweeting, "We strongly protest Russia's decision to block parts of the Black Sea, the Sea of Azov, and the Kerch Strait under the pretext of naval drills. The unprecedentedly large area of exercises essentially disables international navigation in both seas, leading to economic consequences in the region and for Ukrainian ports in particular. We are working closely with partners to ensure that such aggressive actions of Russia as part of its hybrid warfare against Ukraine receive an appropriate response." The Russian media quoting the Kremlin spokesperson as saying all military maneuvers and deployments by Russian ships in the Black Sea are conducted in strict compliance with international maritime law. The Russians are denying intent to block anything, but speaking to a former defense minister in Ukraine, he's saying the situation looks, quote, very bad. Keep in mind, while the tensions are going to the south, today started those Russian military exercises to the north of the country in Belarus. Those exercises expected to conclude on the 20th of February. Savannah.
And at the same time that these exercises are beginning, Matt, one of the big meetings is set for today. This is a gathering between the so-called Normandy Quartet. That's Germany, Ukraine, France, and Russia. What can we expect from those talks?
Yeah, I mean, Savannah, the short answer is very little. And the thing is that these talks have been going on for quite a while. This Minsk II agreement was inked back in 2015, and it was done, again, as you mentioned, through what's called the Normandy 4 or the Normandy format, and that's Russia, Ukraine, Germany, and France. It doesn't involve the United States, rather notably, and, the Kremlin had already said just a couple of days ago, in not so many words, that if it doesn't involve the United States, it's not going to resolve our issues. Now, what this Minsk II agreement is about is just these two separatist, Russian-backed enclaves in the east of the country, not far from where I'm standing right now. And the idea is to resolve resolve their political status. Now, again, this was an agreement that was already inked back in 2015, and the parties agreed to it. The problem is now, no one's able to implement it because still no one can agree on exactly what it means. The Russians believe that this means that these enclaves are independent or autonomous, and that would give them a back door into influencing Ukrainian policy in Kyiv. Guys?
Aaron, let's talk about this other big diplomatic push today. Britain, UK, and Russian foreign ministers met in Moscow. What came out of that? And Boris Johnson's meeting with the NATO Secretary General.
Well, the meeting in Moscow does not seem like it went well. Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, calling the meeting disappointing, saying it was, quote, a case of the deaf talking to the blind, continuing to accuse the West of hysteria, saying that the dialogue was one-sided. Meanwhile, Boris Johnson having that meeting with the NATO Secretary General, saying that the crisis is at its most dangerous point, saying that if there is a Russian invasion of Ukraine, it would be horrific for both Ukraine and Russia. Take a listen.
Fundamentally, a war in Ukraine would be disastrous for the Russian and Ukrainian people and for European security. And together, NATO has made it clear that any incursion into Ukraine would have massive consequences and carry severe costs. There is an alternative route, a diplomatic route, that avoids conflict and bloodshed. And as you say, this would enable us to build ties.
Well, that was Liz Truss, the British Foreign Secretary, addressing her counterpart, Sergei Lavrov. But there was also another meeting between the British Prime Minister and the NATO Secretary General where they warned of the potential consequences of this crisis.
And Matt, now we've talked about Russia's massive military drills and also this new accusation that their warships are blocking the Black Sea. Let's talk, though, now about Ukraine's military power. I mean, we know it's weaker. We've seen citizens doing some drills in the capital. How can Ukraine compete with what Russia's doing, and what's being done to strengthen their capabilities when it comes to their military?
I mean, they can't, is the thing. And, even in our hotel in the lobby, there's a little box that says donations for the Ukrainian military. It's extraordinary here. Wow. The Ukrainian military has really advanced quite a bit since 2014, but they're taking donations from individual citizens. I spoke with one woman who was out with uniformed soldiers buying them equipment that would be used on the front line, non-lethal equipment, but still stuff that would normally be covered in, taxpayer funding in any other country. Take a listen to what she had to say.
Our soldiers are highly motivated. A lot of them have families here, their motherland, but they can't fight and they can't win only on some psychological effects. They also need modern equipment.
So, I mean, the Russian military back in 2020 spent 10 times the amount of money that the Ukrainian military did, if that gives you any sense of just how overwhelming those forces are coming to bear on the borders here in Ukraine. Guys.
Matt and Aaron, some fascinating and important reporting from the ground. Thank you so much.
Now to the White House and the search for the next Supreme Court justice. President Biden will host Democratic members of the Senate Judiciary Committee today to discuss the review process for nominees. NBC News chief White House correspondent Kristen Welker has more on that. Kristen, good morning. Good to have you with us. So what do we know about who's attending that meeting today and what exactly is on the agenda?
So good to be with you. And Joe, I can tell you that we've asked the White House for a specific list of which Senate Judiciary Committee members will be here. So far, we haven't gotten that list, but we know that the president takes the advise and consent role of the Senate Judiciary Committee very seriously. He has said that. He has said that he is going to look at their input as significant. He's going to be joined by the vice president as well, and this will be a chance for him to talk through some of the potential nominees. And of course, it comes on the heels of the president meeting with the chairman of that committee just a short time ago, Senators Chuck Grassley and Dick Durbin. And I was in the room during that Oval Office meeting, and the president underscored the fact that he is going to be making sure that he has close contact with that committee, with senators, as he continues to make this really critical process and decision, Joe.
Kristen, what about outreach to Republican senators? Has this been a priority at all for the president?
Well, look, that has been the big question. In addition to meeting with committee chair Chuck Grassley, we do know that there has been outreach to Republicans on Capitol Hill. We know that he had a call with leader Mitch McConnell, and Press Secretary Jen Psaki has gotten a number of questions about that. How important is it for the president to have bipartisan support for his nominee? Here's one of those exchanges. Take a look.
He's going to choose a nominee whose qualifications, record, character, and devotion to the Constitution and rule of law make them deserving of support from both sides of the aisle. And there are many candidates at the top of their field who fit that profile and who have received bipartisan support in the past. So these conversations are not uniform, right? Sometimes, and the president is certainly seeking input, seeking feedback, but he is treating the process as he believes it should be treated, which is with seriousness, which is approaching it from a bipartisan manner and seeking engagement and advice from a range of officials, elected and non-elected.
Now, the president has said that he will pick a black woman for the high court. Some Republicans have criticized that decision, some even calling it affirmative action. The White House has dismissed that criticism, saying that in the long history of the high court, the fact that there hasn't been a black woman serving on the court really underscores that there's been a failure in the process, not a failure to find black women who are qualified.
So, Kristen, we know the process of vetting a nominee is complicated and thorough, as it should be. Do we have any insight? How far into that process is the Biden administration right now? What will the next steps be?
Well, we're getting a little bit of insight. We know that he has whittled down his choices, less than 12, I am told. He has picked the so-called Sherpa, the person who will help Sherpa his eventual nominee through the process of confirmation. That is former Senator Doug Jones. There's also a team that will be rallying around him. In terms of the names that we are looking at, there are some names that are really rising to the forefront, including Ketanji Brown Jackson, a federal appeals court judge in Washington, D.C., J. Michelle Childs, a federal district court judge in South Carolina, and California Supreme Court Justice Leandra Kruger. So those are some of the names that we are watching as this process gets underway. And the president has said, Joe, that he wants to choose his nominee by the end of the month. Of course, it is worth noting that he will be delivering his State of the Union address on March 1st.
All right.
Joe.
Kristen Welker, good to see you, my friend. Thank you so much.
You too. Great to see you.
Now, this morning, we've got some news on the CDC's new plan to get kids under the age of 5 the COVID vaccine. 10 million doses of Pfizer's vaccine designed for kids between the ages of 6 months and 5 years old could be distributed as early as next week if the FDA grants emergency use authorization for the shots at its meeting next Tuesday. Let's bring in NBC News contributor Dr. Nahid Bhadelia. She's the director of the Boston University Center for Emerging Infectious Diseases Policy and Research. Dr. Bhadelia, good morning. So let's start with this planned rollout of vaccine for kids under 5 years old. So a couple big things here. We don't yet have data from the vaccine trials, and the FDA hasn't made that decision. This meeting is next Tuesday. I know that's two things a lot of parents are probably going to be waiting on before they consider this for their kids. Of course, it sounds nice to have a plan in place, but what do you make about this plan on millions of doses being rolled out before we've got that info?
Yeah, so we have reported info from Pfizer, and we have good info from them in terms of safety. So I'll start with that. So Pfizer has a trial for under 5, and in December, as this trial was going on, in which they can't use endpoints like hospitalizations and deaths because those tend to be much more rare in this population. So they use what we call immunobridging. They looked at the amount of antibodies and other things that were produced in these kids, which could signal that they're going to be protected against an infection and severe outcomes. And so what they saw in December was that they saw a very good response in kids where 6 months to 2 years, but they didn't see that in the older population. However, they started to continue to collect that data, and in January from Omicron showed that there could be efficacy, but of course the FDA would have to look at that data, and all of us would have to see it to be able to make that decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Good info for parents there. Now, Dr. Bedelia, I want to turn to these changes that we're seeing when it comes to mask mandates across the country. Now, I think it's important to keep in mind this has been piecemeal for a while now. There are places that have had these mask mandates, places that really never had much of a mandate in place at all. But do you think the fact that we are seeing some of these bigger cities shift to those expiring mandates, not reinstating them, is this signaling a shift in public policy towards combating the virus? And do you think we're at a point where we should be rolling back some of these safety guidelines as numbers trend down?
Yeah, Savannah, I'll start with the second one first. I don't think we're there yet because, CDC's guidance about low enough transmission rates in communities, we don't see that. Most places in the country still have high transmission, and that probably is an underestimate because a lot of people are just testing themselves at home, right? So we don't even know the real numbers. And in some places, hospitals are still pretty high, and the vaccination rates, particularly around kids, as you know, has been lagging. And so we're not there yet, but there could be a time, I think, in the future. And what I would have loved to see is states pinning a potential rolling back of mandates, states that actually have this, not so much to a date, but really to those kinds of numbers, because those numbers really tell you what is your particular risk. If, for example, if you go into a crowded space and other people are not masked, of coming in contact with somebody who has COVID. And that, to me, makes more sense as a guideline.
All right, Dr. Bedelia, thank you so much. And now, if you have a question for one of our doctors, let us know. There's a lot of things to ask about right now with this new information. Email us at morningnewsnow@nbcuni.com with anything you want to ask us, and let us know if you want to stay anonymous.
Time for a check on your Morning News Now weather.
Which means Bill Cairns is back, of course. Hey, Bill.
Hey, perfect lead-in, going from the Winter Olympics into a wintry forecast returning for many. It's not going to be a huge ordeal, but we are going to see, it feels like spring. I mean, bottom line, across so many areas of the country right now. But this next storm coming down out of Canada is going to bring with it the cold air. So be prepared. We will get a little bit of snow out of this late tonight and then tomorrow through the Great Lakes. Not a lot, but this cold front will have significantly colder air behind it, a true Arctic blast, and probably only have one or two or more of these left this winter. This one will bring with it just a little bit of snow, enough that you'll have to plow and shovel a little bit from International Falls to Duluth, north of Green Bay, up around Cadillac, Michigan, and very light amounts of snow from Buffalo to Cleveland to Erie. As far as the temperatures go, this is where you'll feel that cold blast. Not so much tomorrow. Friday, Minneapolis 30 degrees really isn't that much of a big deal. We will watch with that snow shower activity, though, mostly through the Great Lakes. Notice Friday afternoon how nice it is. Tomorrow is going to be almost 60 in D.C., 60s in the southeast, record warmth in the west. And then as we head through the weekend, here comes that Arctic blast. High temperature only 17 around Ames, Iowa, and Des Moines, 21 in Chicago. So that's much colder than you were. And that cold air will arrive in the East Coast come Sunday. So enjoy your Saturday. It's like a spring-type day all the way up to Boston. 53 degrees in Boston in the middle of February is pretty rare. But that won't be the case on Sunday, as Super Bowl Sunday will be 29 in Boston with a chance of some light snow in the mid-Atlantic region. This does not look like significant snow, maybe an inch or two on grassy surfaces. Many of the roads will be okay south of New York City. And how about that Super Bowl forecast continuing to be incredibly warm?
Bill, I have to say, I'm disappointed about your Northeast map still. I thought you were going to say mood flakes.
Flakes.
I didn't want to say mood flakes. It has a special place. It has to fit perfectly. So, mood flakes has to be on like a morning or an evening. There's a lot that goes into that.
All right, you will let us know when the time is right. All right, thank you, Bill.
Yeah. Thanks, Bill. And now coming up on Morning News Now, a rapidly expanding protest over government vaccine mandates in Canada, now causing economic shockwaves in the U.S.
We're going to bring you the latest on that truckers' protest from the U.S.-Canada border, where the auto industry and major trading lifelines are now being kneecapped. What's next? Welcome back. The protests by truckers in Canada over COVID vaccine mandates in that country is having some serious ripple effects here in the U.S.
Yeah, border cities are dealing with unprecedented amounts of traffic as trucks are backed up for miles on a bridge that links the U.S. to Ontario, and it's having a serious impact on some big U.S. companies.
NBC News correspondent Cal Perry joins us now from near one of those backed up bridges from the border city of Port Huron in Michigan. Cal, good morning to you. We know the traffic on that bridge has been stretched as far as the eye can see. What's the situation there now? Any signs of movement?
No signs of movement. And actually, this shouldn't be happening. As you can see behind me, I'll have Preston kind of show you this bridge. This is not supposed to be the busiest land crossing between the U.S. and Canada, but it has become the busiest land crossing because of what we're seeing in Detroit. That bridge between Detroit and Windsor, the Ambassador Bridge, has been shut down for at least the last 24 hours. It's been 72 hours of on-again, off-again traffic there. And so you have this commercial traffic diverting 60 miles on the U.S. side to this bridge. And as you can see, the capacity is just not there on this bridge. When you talk about the Ambassador Bridge, you talk about being able to handle 10,000 vehicles a day. The bridge behind me can only handle between 4 and 6. This is the visual representation of a supply chain gone wrong. It is all happening, of course, because of just 100 protesters on the Canadian side of that Detroit-Windsor crossing, guys.
Now, Cal, we know that the protests and traffic shutdowns, as we mentioned, are causing some major supply chain disruptions here in the U.S., especially for the auto industry. What can you tell us about the impacts that the bridge closures are having there?
Yeah, you know, the auto industry is the first thing affected. We've heard plants shutting down on both sides of the border, some of them just curtailing what is called a second shift. It was the Chrysler plant in Windsor that was the first to announce. We've heard since from Ford, GM, from Toyota this morning. So it is having a knock-on effect. And when you sort of lay out why there are so many auto parts that travel between the two countries, from the U.S. into Canada, from Canada back to the U.S., if you look at Canada's #2 export, it is cars, 90% of which are bought here in the U.S. And one of the things you'll notice on the bridge behind me, there's not a lot of traffic moving from Canada into the U.S. because there are continued protests on the other side of that border, guys.
So, Cal, what's been the response from the Canadian government and really from the U.S. government, for that matter, because it's impacting cities and companies here? Are there any concrete solutions to these bridge closures?
Not according to the officials. And when you sort of take a step back and look at this, it's a little bit nuts that 100 people can snarl basically 20% of the U.S. and Canadian trade. It is sort of a problem on the ground in Windsor.
Sounds like we may have lost Cal's shot there. All right, Cal Perry, thank you so much for reporting from the U.S.
At least we heard most of that. A lot of good information there, yeah. All right. Now let's take a look at what is making news around the world this morning.
NBC's Raf Sanchez joins us from Tel Aviv. Good morning, Raf.
Hey, Joe. Hey, Savannah. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson still under pressure over those alleged parties during lockdown. Police say they plan to contact 50 suspected partygoers this week. The Prime Minister's office says they can't comment on an ongoing police probe. On top of that, the opposition Labour Party is calling for a separate police investigation into who paid for a refurbishment of the Prime Minister's Downing Street residence. Elon Musk is helping to get the internet back on in Tonga after that massive volcano erupted 3 weeks ago. The Pacific island nation has been without internet since an undersea cable snapped during the eruption. A team from Musk's SpaceX company is in neighboring Fiji trying to get the web back on using satellites. And finally, in Russia, a bored museum security guard allegedly decided to entertain himself by drawing on a 90-year-old abstract painting. The work is called Three Figures, and 2 out of those 3 figures now have eyes doodled onto their featureless faces with a ballpoint pen. The museum says it was some kind of lapse in sanity. But guys, looking on the bright side, at least he didn't cut full eye holes into the painting, right?
And the eyes are in the right location.
I'm speechless.
I know, wow. I feel like that's a no-no.
All
right.
A lapse in, what do you say, sanity?
We're going to use that from now on, a lapse in sanity. All right. Raf, thank you. Appreciate it. Coming up, Bob Saget's cause of death revealed. We're going to hear from the family of America's dad as his tragic and untimely passing.
Plus, major global corporations reportedly skimping on climate pledges. The damning new watchdog report and what it means for the future of climate change. That's up next.
This morning, a long-lost cat is returning home 6 years and 1,500 miles away from where she went missing. That's right, Ashes, that's the cat's name, Ashes, the cat, disappeared from her home in Maine back in 2015. Family says they were shocked to get a voicemail from a vet in Florida last week saying Ashes is alive and well. They were able to identify her thanks to a microchip, and yesterday a family friend escorted her back home. as to how Ashes was able to travel so far or what she may have seen on her incredible journey. Her owner says, I have interrogated her quite strictly, and she is not talking. But if she writes a book, it will be called From the Ashes.
People laughing in the studio. I just went back to my script to look. You said
that's
from
incredible.
Maine
to Florida.
Wow.
I mean, those microchips are amazing. So thank goodness.
Oh my gosh, the guy's a survivor.
Right
Look
here.
at that. All right, that's awesome. All right, now it's been 1 month since beloved comedian Bob Saget was found dead in a hotel room in Florida.
This morning, his family has released a statement stating that, according to investigators, Saget accidentally hit the back of his head on something, thought nothing of it, and then went back to sleep. That's the cause of death. The shocking development as tributes to the actor keep pouring in. 1 month after the sudden loss of America's TV dad, Bob Saget, his heartbroken family has confirmed the cause of death as head trauma. In a statement released overnight, they said authorities have concluded he accidentally hit the back of his head on something, thought nothing of it, and went to sleep, adding no drugs or alcohol were involved. Back in January, Saget was found dead inside an Orlando hotel room. The longtime comedian was in the middle of a tour and had just wrapped up a performance hours earlier. On Wednesday, friends and family took to social media to mark 1 month since Saget's death. His widow, Kelly Rizzo, shared a glimpse of her life with Bob in a lengthy Instagram post, writing in part, 1 month without this incredible man. Bob truly lived life to its fullest. We were in our happy place together whenever we were out at a restaurant, hotel lobby bar, or even our own kitchen. Experiencing simple pleasures in life like that brought him so much joy. I can't even put into words how much I will miss this. Rizzo also spoke with Hoda last month.
So he always was just so kind and loving to everybody. And he was just, he was just he was just the best man I've ever known in my life. And he was just so kind and so wonderful.
Former Full House co-star Candace Cameron Bure also shared her grief.
I had such bad dreams last night. And everyone from Full House was in them. It was missing everyone in fear of losing everyone. And then woke up this morning and realized it's been 1 month.
Saget's family is also urging everyone to remember the love and laughter that Bob brought to this world and the lessons he taught us all. To be kind to everyone, to let the people you love know you love them, and to face difficult times with hugs and laughter. The Saget family also says they're overwhelmed by the outpouring of love from fans, saying that has been a great comfort.
Yeah, wow. It's so tragic when you hear about that and scary. But, again, just every tribute could not be more glowing.
They all are absolutely glowing for him. All right. Many of the world's biggest companies have pledged to reach what's called net zero emissions in the coming decades, meaning they absorb as much carbon as they emit. But are they on track to fulfill those promises?
That's one of the stories we're following this morning in our series Climate Control, exploring how the climate crisis is changing policies and lifestyles around the world and trying to look at solutions. NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns is back with us again. Hey, Bill, we love when you join us again for a segment like this on the show. So this new study from 2 environmental watchdog groups looks at 25 of the biggest companies who they've made these net zero pledges. So we're talking household names, Amazon, Google, Nestle. What'd they find? Are they living up to these promises?
Yeah, well, this shouldn't surprise anyone. Now we have these pledges and commitments from nations and countries and also from all these corporations, and we can go and kind of analyze them and see, does it make sense? And, eventually we'll be able to say, are they actually doing it or not? So these 2 groups, the New Climate Institute and the Carbon Market Watch, they looked at 25 of the biggest companies in the world. We're talking Amazons, the Googles, the Walmarts, and they looked at their pledges and they said, okay, well, are they actually committing to what they should be to get to net zero? And this doesn't have to do with what they're emitting right now. This just has to do with their commitments. And the commitments are coming well short. They found that instead of net zero, the commitments are more like 40% of the 100% that would be needed to get to net zero. And they're saying that the headlines sound good from these companies, but their policies are vague and they're about 20 to 30 years out in the future. And a lot of them depend on what we call carbon offsets. That's like a lot of people saying that they'll plant trees or make forests to capture more carbon and not exactly reduce the carbon that's coming from them. So, Walmart was the one company that was commended for reducing their operations without actually relying on the carbon offset. Wow. So this shouldn't surprise anyone. We're still seeing admissions going up. So, the commitments, they're not holding a lot of water.
Bill, let's talk about solar. It's become much cheaper and more productive over the last decade. It's obviously going to be a big part of any clean energy solution. A new report identifies a massive space for these solar farms hiding in plain sight. Tell us about it.
Yeah, this one makes so much sense. It just made me wonder, why aren't we doing it 100%? Let me ask you guys, how many big box stores and malls do you think exist in the United States?
Oh, geez.
Oh.
Bill, I have no idea. 100,000.
You're infusing this segment with your quizzes as well.
It's 100,000. There's 100,000 big box stores.
Okay, Joe won a quiz. Joe won a quiz.
I sort of mumbled it because I clearly wasn't sure.
There's 10,000 alone in California, and these just make so much sense because they're not obtrusive. You don't see them. They're on top of the buildings. You need a flat surface, and obviously you need direct sunlight. And the study actually went and looked. If we actually put solar on all 100,000, it would be the equivalent of powering 8 million homes, taking 11 million cars off the road. And something I didn't know was that some of the stores are already doing this. Apple, Amazon, Target, and IKEA are already starting to put solar on their roofs. And IKEA especially, they already have solar on 90% of its U.S. store locations. And I'll ask you one more quiz at the end of this one. Which stores do you think have the most square footage in the U.S.?
Was it IKEA?
I'm going to guess IKEA.
IKEA.
Walmart is number one with the most big box stores, and Target is number two.
Oh.
So,
right.
we'll see if that would be a good use of solar.
It's got to be IKEA.
Yes.
We don't know.
Repeat that again. I missed that. Hold on.
I said per store, it's got to be IKEA. Those places are ridiculously large.
Yes, they're huge. Like 3 football fields.
Exactly. All right. And finally, Bill, this is sort of a weird one about the smell of snow. I mean, we've got warming temperatures and everything's changing so much around us. What's with this?
Yeah, this one is not peer-reviewed science. There's no snow smell data that goes back decades. But a smell researcher, Johan Lundstrom, who's a professor of neuroscience, he's saying that the smell of snow is changing, and it's changing by region. I didn't even realize that snow had that much of a smell, but he says that, the snow in like New York or Cleveland or Colorado smells differently, and that with climate change, as it warms up, smells become more smelly is how things will get as the planet warms up. And he's saying that the snow absorbs molecules from the air, and that the smell of our snow is changing. That's his theory.
Oh.
Been wearing those masks, so I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to smell anything. That's true,
right.
But,
see,
yeah.
I'm not sure I want to smell the New York snow more either.
No kidding.
Yeah, the air around us. Okay, that's interesting. All right, thanks, Bill. We love the segment.
Thank you.
And coming up, the latest read on inflation just crossing the wires moments ago. We'll break down the new numbers and what they mean for your bottom line. Is relief at the pump or the grocery store on the way?
Plus, opting out of Valentine's Day, why some companies are now easing up on marketing ploys for the lucrative holiday. That's up next.
Welcome back. Breaking moments ago, new economic data for the U.S., and it looks like prices on pretty much everything continue to rise. The inflation rate hit 7.5% in January over the year. That's more than Wall Street expectations, and that figure is up from December, where it was at 7%. Here to break us down these numbers is Bertha Coombs back with us. Bertha, so walk us through these latest inflation numbers. What do they mean for us at the store?
Well, Savannah, we already know what it means for us. If you've gone to the store, you've seen that prices are higher. A lot of this is being fueled by literally fuel and food. If you take out food and energy, which we all need to live, but that's sort of the stable number that they look at, inflation was up about 6% year over year. That was also a hotter number than expected. We saw, once again, gasoline prices are up a lot higher than expected. Food prices are up 7% this January. Compared to back in January 2020, they rose 1.8%. That's where we had been. So this inflation has really ratcheted up a lot where it really hurts. One of the areas, interestingly, that is going slower, not as inflationary, is healthcare services. Some of us aren't using as much. Those prices aren't rising as much. Back in 2020, in January 2020, healthcare services prices were up 5%. This past month, they were only up 2.7%. We also got better than expected weekly jobless claims, though. That is a bit of good news there.
Yeah, tell us about what are those numbers showing?
We saw unemployment claims fall 18,000 to 223,000, which keeps us at that low, historically low rate. Certainly not what we've seen pre-pandemic, but at the pandemic lows for the time. And it's the third straight week that we've seen those numbers decline. Taking those numbers all in stride and all together, the one thing that people are worried about and it could mean for us is higher interest rates. We're already seeing rates go up on Treasury bonds, and the expectation is that the Fed will now move more quickly to raise rates to try to tamp down on inflation.
All right, Bertha Coombs on this breaking news for us. Thanks so much, Bertha. Great to have you back on again.
Valentine's Day is just around the corner, but instead of overwhelming your inbox with deals on flowers, chocolates, and dinner, some companies are taking a step back. Joining us now to talk about this shift is Karen Leland. She is a brand and marketing strategist and author of The Brand Mapping Strategy. Karen, good to have you with us. So every holiday, we are used to getting slammed with ads and emails, and many of us still probably are. But why are some companies pulling back for Valentine's Day?
Well, I think there's two things. There's the big picture, which is that in the last 50 years, we've gone from getting 500 ads a day to 5,000 a day. So one, people are overwhelmed with ads. And so to cut through that noise really takes something special. But with Valentine's Day in particular, what we're really facing is a situation where a lot less people are celebrating it. The latest research shows that about only 52% of Americans plan on celebrating Valentine's Day this year. That's way down. And part of that is, think about it. We've gone through a really tough time. A lot of people have lost people to COVID. The divorce rate is still really high. So for a lot of people, Valentine's Day doesn't represent this sense of love and belonging. It represents depression and anxiety. And I think companies are starting to realize that they have to be a lot more sensitive to their individual consumer. And I think that's the reason around this campaign to give people the chance to opt out of advertising for Valentine's Day and other holidays, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, Father's Day. Those can be sensitive subjects for some people. Do you think this trend is extending to those as well?
Absolutely. You know, I whenever Father's Day comes around and I get bombarded with these ads, you know, of course, I think about my dad who passed, and it's sad. It's just sort of reinforcing that. And so I think what you're finding is there's this general trend in marketing called thoughtful marketing, which is where companies are becoming a lot more thoughtful and empathetic about how the individual consumer is responding to certain ads. And so I think you're going to see about 150 companies have joined this movement so far for these ads to allow people to opt out for holidays. I think what you're going to find is that trend's going to grow, and more companies will give people as individuals the choice to say yes or no to major holiday advertising.
So with this trend toward thoughtful marketing rather than just overloading people with promotions and deals, what else do you expect to see maybe change down the line? How are companies going to adapt their messaging?
You know, it's interesting because there's two major trends right now. One is thoughtful marketing, but the other is really sincerity. And the sincerity has to do with trust. If you look at the recent survey that came out from the Edelman Trust Survey, 58% of consumers said that their decision to purchase a brand or advocate for a brand was based on the brand's beliefs and their expression of those beliefs, right? So we have this saying in writing, which is show, don't tell. So companies all the time say, we care about you, we love you, we're interested in you. But when you show it by your actions, you then have a much more powerful message. And I think what we're going to see is companies starting to realize that their sincerity isn't a matter of what they say. You know, we're talking about Valentine's Day. It isn't saying I love you, it's show me how you love me, right? So it's companies really showing consumers by little things, but just giving them the chance to opt out of ads.
Karen Tiber Leland, this was fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right.
And apologies if you'd like to opt out of my heart clothing between now and Valentine's Day.
What you're doing. That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.